Hello and welcome to this brand new edition of Global Lens on News9 Live with me, Neha Khanna. We have a packed show for you and our focus continues to be on the escalating tensions between India and Canada. For over a week now, the diplomatic row between India and Canada has been snowballing thanks to Canadian Prime Minister Justin Trudeau's wild charge made in the Canadian Parliament, accusing India of being involved in the killing of Khalistani terrorist Hardeep Singh Nijjar. A Canadian citizen, Nijjar was the founder of Khalistan Tiger Force, an offshoot of Khalsa International, both of which are banned in India. He was gunned down outside a Gurudwara in Surrey in the British Columbia province of Canada in June this year. So far, the Trudeau government has not managed to produce a shred of evidence to back its claims against India. Now, an explosive report by the Washington Post clearly indicates that it is Canadian authorities that have actually botched the investigation into the Nijjar murder case every step of the way. Let's examine the report in some detail. For starters, the police arrived at the scene of the crime some 20 minutes after the shooting, despite the fact that the Gurudwara is in a heavily patrolled area. Next, there was a tussle between the Surrey Police and the Royal Canadian Mounted Police or RCMP, lasting hours over who had jurisdiction in this case. And here's something very significant. According to the Washington Post report, there were at least 6 men and 2 cars involved in this shooting, a white sedan and a silver sedan. According to eyewitnesses who've been quoted by the Washington Post, the white sedan carried the killers. Eyewitnesses described them as wearing a Sikh get-up, with hoodies pulled over small pugs or turbans on their heads and masks over their bearded faces. These men were chased by Gurudwara volunteers. The killers ended up in a cul-de-sac where the silver sedan, which was the getaway vehicle with 3 people in it, was waiting, and they managed to give the Gurudwara staff the slip and escaped from there. Nijjar's mechanic has been quoted as saying that he recently found a tracker in the wheel well of the Khalistani separatist pickup truck. As we said, not only did the police arrive late on the scene, they also argued and fought over jurisdiction and who would lead the investigation, causing a delay of several hours. Not a single arrest has been made so far. None of the killers have been identified. The murder took place on the 18th of June. And it was only on the 21st of July, more than a month later, that authorities asked the public for help in identifying the 2 gunmen. On the 16th of August, they sought help in identifying the 2 cars that were involved in the shooting. The Washington Post says it visited 39 businesses and homes along the route that the assailants took during their escape. And a majority of those interviewed said they had not been contacted at all by the authorities all these months. One Gurudwara committee member has said, "Until Trudeau's announcement last week, I had 0% faith that they would crack this case. They interviewed me a total of 1 time and they haven't told us anything in months." That's not me, that's an eyewitness talking about this case. So you see, even as we wait with bated breath for the Trudeau administration to provide some concrete evidence backing their allegations of India's involvement, this exposé by the Washington Post clearly shows that it is Canada that bungled the probe completely, with the investigators acting like the Keystone Cops from the word go and being utterly clueless till date about the identity of the real killers. All this when Canada has been shouting from the rooftops that it received intelligence pointing to India's involvement from one of the Five Eyes partners. It's an intelligence sharing alliance of 5 countries, including the United States. They claim to have foreign intelligence, yet their own investigators are in the dark about both the identity and the whereabouts of Nijjar's real killers. Interestingly, India has received support from its neighbors, Bangladesh and Sri Lanka, in this regard. In fact, the Sri Lankan Foreign Minister Ali Sabri has ripped into the Canadian Prime Minister. He says he's not surprised by his remarks, since Justin Trudeau keeps making outrageous and unsubstantiated allegations. In Sabri's own words, some of the terrorists have found a safe haven in Canada. The Canadian Prime Minister has this way of just coming out with some outrageous allegations without any supporting evidence. The same thing they did for Sri Lanka, a terrible total lie saying that Sri Lanka had a genocide. That is the Sri Lankan Foreign Minister talking about Justin Trudeau. There are some who are now asking just where are Canada's allies in all of this. One foreign affairs analyst writes, and I quote, "In the public eye at least, Mr. Trudeau has appeared to be left largely on his own as he goes toe-to-toe with India, one of the world's fastest growing economies with a population 35 times bigger than Canada's. His allies in the Five Eyes Intelligence Alliance provided seemingly boilerplate public statements, all stopping far short of full-throated support." Well, they haven't exactly rushed to Canada's defense, have they? Some are now asking, has it been a very lonely week for Justin Trudeau on the global stage?
Look, we care about both countries and we care about their relationship. Our relationship is rock solid with both of them. And I think that all of us need to make sure that we can come together as countries that take seriously sovereignty, take seriously security, and take seriously the potential of our relationship. But as you see here demonstrated, US and India are definitely stronger together.
Yeah, we have always suffered, and some of the terrorists have found safe haven in Canada. Canadian Prime Minister has this way of just coming out with some outrageous allegations without any supporting proof. The same thing they did for Sri Lanka, a terrible total lie about saying that Sri Lanka had a genocide. Everybody knows there was no genocide in our country. And I saw yesterday he had gone and given a rousing welcome to somebody who have associated with the Nazis in the past on the Second World War. So this is questionable, and we have dealt it in the past. We have categorically rejected those outrageous allegations. So I'm not surprised that sometime Prime Minister Trudeau comes out with outrageous, unsubstantiated allegations. Yeah, that has actually affected our relationship. People to people, we have good contact. Foreign Ministry has a different take on that. Global Ministry of Global Affairs has very clearly said that Sri Lanka did not go through a genocide. Whereas the Prime Minister, as a politician, stand up and says that genocide had taken place. That itself is contradictory to each other. That doesn't help. I don't think anyone should poke their nose into the other countries and tell as to how we should govern our country. Yeah, that's a conversation going on for some period of time. India has expressed its concerns for a long period of time. But we have now come out with a SOP, standard operating procedure. When we were making that, we consulted many of our friends, including India. So as long as they comply with the SOP, we have no problem. But if it doesn't comply with the SOP, we have a problem. So therefore, as far as I know, we have not given the permission to come to Sri Lanka during the month of October. So there are negotiations going on, but Indian security concerns, which are legitimate, are very, very important for us. We have always told that because we want to keep our region as a zone of peace.
What I will say is we are deeply concerned by the allegations referenced by Prime Minister Trudeau. We remain in close contact with our Canadian partners, as the Secretary said on Friday. We believe it's critical that Canada's investigation proceed and that the perpetrators be brought to justice. And we have publicly and privately urged the Indian government to cooperate in the Canadian investigation.
All right. What should we make of this Washington Post expose? Let's dissect it with our guest. Joining me on the show tonight, as always, Ramakrishna Sridharan, consulting editor with News9, joining us live from Washington, D.C. Also with us on the show, Ambassador N. Parthasarathy, former Indian diplomat. We're also hoping to be joined in a moment by another former Indian diplomat, Ambassador Manju Seth. All right, Sri, let me start with you. A lot to unpack here. You heard how the Sri Lankan Foreign Minister has ripped into Justin Trudeau, but let's focus for the moment on the India-Canada row. This is all about the killing of one man called Hardeep Singh Nijjar. Now, even as Canada shouts from the rooftops and beats its breast, saying India did it without actually sharing a shred of evidence, either with us or with the rest of the world. It's fascinating what the Washington Post has reported about how it was Canada itself that botched their investigation into the Nijjar killing every step of the way. As I said at the start of the show, it's almost as if the Canadian police have acted like the Keystone Cops. What should we make of it?
Neha, this is quite damning. I don't think there's any other way to put this because it raises a fundamental question. If Canadian authorities, the police themselves have not had the opportunity to investigate, do a thorough investigation of what really happened, and chase leads and interrogate people, witnesses who were present at the scene, then the fundamental question that arises is, did Prime Minister Trudeau have enough to go on to make this allegation publicly against India? Did he solely rely on the intelligence from Five Eyes? What about the country's own investigators, their own police, their intelligence agencies? How much have they corroborated what they have got from the Five Eyes intelligence consortium? So this is actually going to put Prime Minister Trudeau and the administration on the back foot, Neha, because how do you go and make such a serious allegation against a country without your own police force and intelligence agencies doing a comprehensive investigation and giving you a credible report which you can rely on? So that it's a very, very fundamental thing. I think the Canadian people, first of all, will want to know, how did this happen? How did the Prime Minister make that statement? So I think this is something Prime Minister Trudeau will have to explain to the Canadian people and to India, of course, Neha.
Absolutely. Let me take this to Ambassador Parthasarthi now. Sir, Canada claims it has foreign intelligence that clearly points to India's involvement in Nijjar's killing. We are still waiting, as I said, with bated breath for Justin Trudeau to share his evidence with us. That hasn't materialized. However, if you look at the Washington Post story that's come out today, as she says, it is very damning for the Canadian authorities and for the Trudeau administration. I mean, just look at some of the facts, sir. The cops were first fighting over whose jurisdiction held in this case, who was going to lead the investigation. Then we are told that it took them weeks, more than a month, to even go back to the scene of crime and actually seek the public's help in identifying the killers. For weeks together, they had no idea about what had happened there. The Washington Post says they have interviewed dozens of people who are local area residents who say they've not even been approached by the authorities so far. So the bottom line is that it's been well over 3 months that a murder takes place on Canadian soil, and the Canadian authorities are clueless about the identity of the killers, about their whereabouts, and they continue to point a finger at India. Isn't it time they did some soul searching?
In fact, the Prime Minister of Canada made a statement in their parliament saying that they are pursuing the alleged credible clues that maybe Indian agencies are involved. But the truth now is the credibility of the Prime Minister Trudeau that is in question. If you just go back 2 weeks, India held the G20 summit, which was a resounding summit. All the world leaders were there, and everyone praised the theme of what India had for the G20 summit, and the way India conducted it, and the way India said that all countries should cooperate and go together for the Vasudhaiva Kutumbakam, as you say, the world as a family. When everything is going well, the Prime Minister, in fact, India has been complaining to the Prime Minister Trudeau that because of their tacit permission, there have been Khalistani elements which have been actually brutally attacking. If you remember last year, August, they attacked one radio journalist, Jyoti Man. And then again, they went and tried to attack the Indian mission. And they even tried to threaten the Indian diplomat. So continuously they have been doing all these things and they're permitting things which are inimical to India's interests. So that's why we were the ones who were complaining, and there was no bilateral meeting with the Canadian Prime Minister at the summit. But then at that time, Prime Minister Trudeau comes to discuss and say that the alleged possibility of Indian agencies involved. And obviously the Prime Minister denies it clearly that there is no basis for it, and obviously there is nothing true about it. But still with all that, what he does is that he goes back and in public, in the parliament, makes an announcement saying that they are following. I do not know. When there are diplomatic channels or there, diplomatic means are there, what was his pressure or what was his compulsion to make such a public statement? Unless he was under pressure from the Khalistani or the Sikh elements who were trying to say. In fact, while he says that it was India who were trying to interfere in their affairs, it was he. In fact, if you recall, just in 2000, last year, when farmers' agitation was going on in India, he was the one who made the statement about the farmers' agitation that was from where the Sikhs were involved. And in 2018, when he visited India, during his visit, he invited Khalistani supporters to his reception. So he is the one who has been doing all that, which is interfering in India's affairs. And now he has gone and he has made this statement which alleges India is somehow or the other involved. But it is obvious that they themselves have not been able to do any investigation. There seems to be no truth in the matter, and their investigation has not proceeded as is normally expected. So it is now the credibility of Prime Minister Trudeau is on the block, and it is for him to justify. And as you yourself explained, many of the world leaders and many of the countries, they have already said that what he has done is to make himself isolated. What he has been trying to say, there is no truth in the matter. So obviously, he has to walk a lonely path.
It does look that way, sir. You know, the Sri Lankan Foreign Minister has outright called Justin Trudeau a liar. But that apart, you know, Ambassador Manju Seth is also with us. Ambassador Seth, you know, India's External Affairs Minister addressed the UN General Assembly earlier this evening, and he made a significant statement which most people believe is actually aimed at Canada. He said, respect for territorial integrity and non-interference in internal affairs cannot be exercises in cherry picking, as has just been pointed out by Ambassador Parthasarathi. When farmers take to the streets in India, Justin Trudeau thinks it is his business to comment on it and to express concern over the farmers' rights in India. And now he's accusing India of interfering in his country's internal affairs, like I keep saying, without sharing a shred of evidence with us.
Absolutely, you're right, Neha. The way PM Trudeau has started this whole thing by saying credible allegations, evidence of credible allegations. I think that in itself was a pointer to what the whole agenda was and what they were, getting at. Because it's really a difficult situation where you openly go and make this kind of allegation and say on the basis of credible allegations. It has to be evidence. India has shared so much evidence against Nijjar. He was in the red corner notice was issued against him. But that, and with other, the other terrorist linked or terrorists, let me say, who've got asylum, who have got safe havens in Canada, action needs to be taken against them. And India has shared credible evidence with them, not credible allegations. And even then, no action has been taken. Even after the recent open threats that were issued against our diplomats and our ambassador, our high commissioner there, our consul generals, I think even then, the government of Canada has been saying it's, they've been justifying it with freedom of expression, under the term of freedom of expression. But that's absolutely ridiculous. If somebody is issuing death threats, that is not freedom of expression. Because they were almost, inciting people to go and carry out these threats. So I think the Trudeau government really needs to understand where they are, and the kind of action that they are taking. They are, I think, going to harm them, the people of Canada, of course, and the relationship with India is only going to get. We don't realize what they are doing and take corrective action.
And you know, most people seem to believe that it's going to hurt Canada much more that it will hurt India. Before I take this back to Sri, Ambassador Seth, I want your thoughts on, you know, another story that we're focusing on the show tonight. Of course, you know, when you say that Justin Trudeau has talked about credible allegations against India, it's almost laughable, because it sounds like an oxymoron to me. Either you have an allegation or you have credible evidence. There is no such thing as a credible allegation. But that apart, ma'am, what would you say about the Washington Post report that has come out today, which says that the Canadian authorities completely bungled the investigation into the Nijjar killing case from day one? It's been over 3 months. Not only are they completely in the dark about the identity of the killers and their whereabouts, the manner in which they've gone about investigating the case is laughable, to say the least. This has come out in Washington Post today. So the question we're asking is that while Justin Trudeau points a finger at India, doesn't he need to look within and see what's happening in his own country?
Absolutely, because you know, I think he has his political compulsions. That's the only reason. I think that he's just playing the, should I say, Khalistani card, and voicing mouthing their allegations, because the NDP government is part of his, NDP party is part of his government. And if the NDP withdraws support, the Trudeau government falls. So I think it's also a question of his wanting to remain in power and not let go. And I think he doesn't know what to do in this situation, because when he went back from India, I think, this is my reading, that when he went back from India and he didn't go back with a possible or a positive reply from India, instead he got a mouthful saying, please take action against all the terrorists, and, you know, take action and stop giving safe havens to, giving a safe haven to activities and terror activists who are conducting, promote, so to speak, terrorism in India. So he didn't get a mouthful. He didn't get what he was looking for, I think. And so when he went back, he may have faced a lot of pressure from the NDP. And I think this could be the result of that. And he has just gone overboard. And of course, we must remember that it's only a small percentage of people of the Sikh community which sympathizes or which has this thing for sympathy for the pro-Khalistanis or the pro-Khalistani movement. Even in India, that seems to have lost traction. So for Trudeau to lobbying with them and giving them support, I think is really not...
in fact, as many have said, the Khalistan movement was all but dead. It seems to be alive only in Canada. And some have also said if Justin Trudeau is so sympathetic to their cause, maybe he can allow creation of Khalistan in his own country. The problem will be solved. Everyone will be happy, right? All right. But on a more serious note, let me put this next question to all three of you, starting with you, Sri. You know, Sri, I have been reading some opinion pieces on how India-Canada ties have plummeted in just the last 8 days. There was one interesting piece that caught my eye. This particular foreign affairs analyst says, and I'm quoting him here, in the public eye at least, Mr. Trudeau has appeared to be left largely on his own as he goes toe-to-toe with India, one of the world's fastest growing economies. His allies in the Five Eyes Intelligence Alliance have provided seemingly boilerplate public statements, all stopping far short of full-throated support. They haven't rushed to Canada's defense. And not to mention, Sri, the disaster with regard to the Canadian Parliament honouring a Nazi, which Justin Trudeau has himself admitted has been deeply embarrassing for the country. Therefore, let me ask you and the other guests a pointed question. Has it really been a lonely week for Justin Trudeau?
Oh, it absolutely has been, Neha. The isolation that Prime Minister Trudeau faces is not just on the global stage, but it's going to happen increasingly in Canada. Let me explain why. the political dividend which the Liberal Party and Mr. Trudeau are counting on from supporting the Khalistani movement and defending the terrorists who are there in Canada, this is not going to go down well with the Canadian people at large. Now, as Ambassador Seth mentioned, the Sikh population in Canada is very small, it's just 2%. Now, out of these 2%, only a minuscule, there are 770,000 Sikhs in Canada, out of which I think the best cases, there are 7,000 people who are devout Khalistani supporters and followers. So 7,000 people out of 38 million people, Neha, that comes to 20th of a percent. So 99.982% of Canadians have nothing to do with this issue. So the question Canadians are now asking is it fair to allow this violent and separatist minority to hold Canada to ransom and jeopardize its international relations and therefore the interests of the Canadian people at large? Now, this is not conscionable at any level. Canada needs to integrate with the world stage. It cannot be doing things which jeopardizes the interest of 99% of Canadians. So Mr. Trudeau, first of all, has to answer that as the Canadian Prime Minister, whether his actions are actually furthering the interests of Canada, the Canadian people who he serves, or is it detrimental to their interest? So I think the isolation which he's now facing on the international stage is going to increasingly play out in Canada itself. He's already losing popularity. I think the conservative leader, the opposition leader, Mr. Pierre Poilievre, he's becoming more and more popular. And although elections are not due in Canada until 2025, I think it's safe to say that this is a moment which the Canadian voters are going to keep in mind, and they're going to weigh the issues that are now come to the head and see whether this sort of a wokeism is actually what they expect of their leader, and whether the party they put into power, the leader they put into power, should serve the interests of all Canadians and not just a minuscule minority.
You know, the trouble seems to be, Shri, that it doesn't look like Justin Trudeau is interested in furthering the interests of Canadians in general. He seems to be furthering his own political agenda. As has been pointed out by every panelist, he is clearly catering to a particular constituency. This is vote bank politics at its worst. And of course, Ambassador Parthasarathy, many have also talked about how Justin Trudeau was really smarting under the insult and the snub that he received from India during the G20 summit, and he decided to go back and release his frustration in this manner. But on a more serious note, sir, given, some of the commentary that we have seen and heard over the last few days over this diplomatic row, would you say that Justin Trudeau has overplayed his hand? He's messed with the wrong country at the wrong time over the wrong issue. I certainly don't envy Justin Trudeau right now. Do you believe it's a very lonely time to be Justin Trudeau? Ambassador Parthasarathy, that's for you.
Yeah, I think that is true, because obviously he tried to do that just to get the political support of this Sikh constituency, out of which only a small number of activists are kind of holding him under influence and pressure. In fact, can you imagine any country where somebody takes let's say, a tableau of former Prime Minister of India, like Mrs. Indira Gandhi,
yes,
in a white sari with blood on it, and then they take it around.
It was a celebration, sir. Make no mistake. They celebrated the assassination of Indira Gandhi. That's what it was.
And these kind of things are allowed in the name of freedom of speech and democracy. This is not something anybody does it towards a friendly country. But this is not happening right now. This has been happening since 1985. If you remember the Air India bombing, terrorist bombing that took place. Since then, they took refuge, and continuously this has been happening. But the only thing that he made a mistake is that he chose the timing wrong, and the time now it is not the same India what it was 20 years ago. Today's India is something which is cooperative with major countries, which stands for peace, and then this is the country which has a lot of friends. And you cannot simply make allegations where you don't have any evidence to prove it. If it is for him, he has made the allegation, he has to come and prove it. Unless he proves it, it is for him. And this is not the first time he has done this. He has done it with China before. He has done it with some of the African countries and other countries. But he has never learned a lesson for the simple reason he thinks that the world means it is just West. What you mean by that is America and Europe. But there is a much bigger role that is being played by countries in Asia, countries in Africa, and other things. And he has picked the wrong choice, that is India. And India is not without friends. We have a lot of friends. And more importantly, what India is doing is not interfering in other countries' affairs, but it is India which is the weak. So what it is trying, and to go there and then try to say that we are interfering in Canadian affairs, I think he has done something which has crossed the line, and he is going to, I suppose, he will face the problems in the coming months, and he will get isolated. That's what the situation seems to be. It is for him to explain.
I agree with you, sir. The burden of proof is on Justin Trudeau. Let's face it. It is not on India. This is shoot and scoot diplomacy, which seems to have completely backfired on Justin Trudeau. If you make the allegation, you provide the evidence. It is not for India to prove its innocence to the world. I think that is very, very clear. Ambassador Manju Seth, let me come to you, ma'am, at this point. You know, as has already been stated, number one, we're still waiting for that evidence. Where is the evidence? That's the question that Justin Trudeau needs to answer if he is so convinced that India is indeed responsible for this killing. Two, as has been pointed out, you know, he is going toe-to-toe with India, one of the world's fastest growing economies, with a population 35 times bigger than Canada's. I'm again reading from an opinion piece that I read earlier in the day. His allies in the Five Eyes Intelligence Alliance have provided seemingly boilerplate public statements, all stopping far short of full-throated support. India has only recently had a very successful G20 summit where we managed to bring, you know, countries together despite sharp differences. We have proved that our global stature is growing. India is seen increasingly as a bridge builder. You know, many have also said that, you know, this entire situation has perhaps put President Biden in a sticky situation, because while he has this long-standing relationship with Canada, but he's also been going out of his way to woo India, to build a stronger partnership with India, primarily to further America's interests in the Indo-Pacific region, to counter China. Therefore, taking everything into account, do you believe, ma'am, that Justin Trudeau has taken a huge risk that is only resulting in his isolation globally? Has he taken panga with the wrong country?
Absolutely, I agree with you. He has taken panga with the wrong country and at the wrong time also. And as you said, even the US is in a bind in this situation. And they really don't know how to, you know, they will try, of course, to find a solution. I read somewhere there was something about mediation, US mediation, to find via media and get this resolved. Because the evidence is just not there. I think it was just on allegations that he has done this, and he has made a big mistake. Also, he has harmed, Canadian interests, because there are so many Indian students going to Canada to study in the universities, contributing hugely to their economy and to the universities running. And that if this situation worsens, they will have, people will start withdrawing from there or not go to Canada. Because Mr. Pannu, Gurpatwant Singh Pannu has been issuing out threats to Indians and Hindus and saying, please go back from here, leave Canada, and and things like that. That's going to really be very harmful for the Canadian economy as well. And our investors also who are there will also want to come back. So it'll really harm the Canadian economy and harm Trudeau. So he has got isolated, and he has to come out of this. And it is on him. The onus is on him to prove what he's saying. Otherwise, he needs to, I think, make an apology and get out of the situation that he's landed himself in, if he knows what's good for him and what's good for Canada.
Absolutely. I see Shree's raised hand, so I'm coming to you, Shree. Well, fact of the matter is that Justin Trudeau has not even apologized for the Canadian Parliament hailing a Nazi as a war hero. He's trying to blame that too on Russia and Russian propaganda. So I think it would be a little too far-fetched to expect him to, issue an apology to India. But the question, Shree, is how is Justin Trudeau going to dig himself out of this hole?
So, Neha, first of all, I think the question of has he taken panga with the wrong country, the more important question, which accompanies that question is whether the issue on which he has, chosen to entangle with a friendly country, a democratic country, is whether that is justified. How do you justify defending people who are funding terrorism, urging attacks and instigating people and asking for balkanization of India that's happening on your soil? That is number one. So let me ask a question. If tomorrow the people who attacked, let's say, the Capitol in the US, if they were to go to Canada, become Canadian citizens, and continue their attacks on the US government, on the Constitution of America, would Canada want to deal with such people similarly? I'm sure not. I don't think US would be that patient with them as they have been with the Khalistani issue. So that is number one. So your question was, how is he going to dig himself out of this? I don't think this is going to be an easy issue for Mr. Trudeau, Neha, simply because, like I said earlier, this is now surfacing several important issues which the Canadian voters, the Canadian citizens, need to now weigh as they choose the next government, the next leader. So in a way, Neha, I'm glad that these issues have now come to the fore, they've come to the head, because this has been festering. Canadians are very, very polite people, they're very nice people. And the fact that they're taking in so many refugees every year speaks to how welcoming the Canadian country is. But the politicians should not be allowed to misuse the pressure groups within this immigrant community to damage and compromise the interests of Canada at large, of Canadians at large. So I think it's going to be very, very difficult for Mr. Trudeau to justify his actions and explain to Canadian people why he has chosen to do what he has chosen to do.
In fact, if you ask me, I would go so far as to say that the Prime Minister of Canada seems to be giving Canadians a bad name. Ambassador Parthasarathi, it's interesting. Some observers have even said in the last few days that while there is no doubt that through his reckless actions, Justin Trudeau has dealt a body blow to India-Canada ties, but at the end of the day, they say this isn't really a Canada-India problem. This is a Trudeau-India problem. The question is, what is the way forward? As we discussed earlier, Trudeau's approval ratings back home are plummeting. He seems to have dug himself into a hole. He seems to be facing a growing global isolation, not to mention embarrassment and humiliation after the controversy over that Nazi appearing in the Canadian Parliament. Just what is the way forward, sir, for Justin Trudeau and for India-Canada ties?
I think there are two things which are important at this stage, which we should recall. Number one is some of these countries which thought that they will make the rules for the international community and all others should follow because it's going to be a rule-based international order, but they will be exempt from that because they make the rules. They don't have to follow that. They can break the rules. That time has gone. So if they make the rules, if there are rules, it is not only for others, they also will have to follow the rules. That is number one. And number two is, as they say, there is no gun which fires only in one direction. So this terrorism and their support for the Khalistani elements and the Khalistani support for terrorism as well as terrorist funding and all these are happening now for the several years, but this is not going to be only here. It can also happen in a different way on the Canadian soil itself. So that's what needs to be considered by Mr. Trudeau and whoever is supporting him. More importantly, what has happened because of the statement that is made by the Prime Minister Trudeau and what he has been done, the attention has now been drawn that just because of the act or the pressure or or the influence of a few elements, it is overall it is affecting the community, the Canadian community. It is affecting Indians who are in Canada who are not necessarily Sikhs. Who are Sikhs, they are also being affected because probably 98% of the Sikhs who are there, they are not the Khalistani supporters, because Khalistan is no more an issue in India. It is only a diaspora issue in Canada. So Sikhs are being affected, other Indians are being affected, and Canadians are being affected.
Absolutely.
Because there is a lot of investment, there is a lot of trade, and there is a lot of so many other things. We both are friendly countries. There is so much of relations that has been going on. So this one thing that it draws attention is, it shows that a small thing, a misstep, a miscalculation, and something what the Prime Minister does, how it is going to affect the country itself and how it is going to impact even economically and otherwise. So I think it is for him to understand what he has done. At least he should have the courage and conviction that at least now they should take steps to kind of sit together, try to resolve the issue. And wherever they have done, if they have evidence, clear evidence, they should bring it and show it to India. If they don't have evidence, they should accept that,
and
yes,
I think
we are wrong.
Justin Trudeau might be asking himself at this point, how am I going to walk back from this? Ambassador Manju Seth, I will give you the last word, ma'am. As has been pointed out by both she and Ambassador Parthasarathi, there is no doubt that we have seen way too much hypocrisy and double standards on part of the West for far too long. This has been pointed out by External Affairs Minister S. Jaishankar as well. And he has very rightly and eloquently pointed out today, while addressing the UN General Assembly, that the days of cherry picking are long gone. Our terrorist is a terrorist. Your terrorist is an innocent, law-abiding Canadian citizen, just a poor plumber. That is not going to wash anymore. Justin Trudeau needs to wake up and realize this.
Absolutely, and the fact that PM Trudeau has taken this attitude that that he is not a terrorist, I think that is totally unacceptable, because he has been doing it constantly, and all the other cohorts around, the others are all together in it. All the other rest of them who are been issuing all these threats against India and Indian diplomats, and as you mentioned, your terrorist is, a peaceful citizen.
A poor plumber.
Fighter is a poor plumber, or even they'll call him a freedom fighter, but our terrorist is a terrorist. So I think, and that understanding he has to have, and the double standards, of course, are not going away anytime soon. But it will happen in the future. But I think already the Canadians will realize. And I also was thinking maybe we should do a media campaign or a social media campaign to make people aware in Canada of the actual situation, of what is happening and what their leader is trying to do, without, again, taking any names, but indirectly, as the EM mentioned today. And especially we can, I think in the Nijjar case, we can put the facts, put the evidence in the public domain. I think we could do that to create a kind of, people to understand what is happening and what is this whole thing about. And Canada, as I said once somewhere else as well, if you have, like in the Pakistani case, if you have terrorists in your background or snakes in your background, in your backyard, don't think that they will not bite you and only bite your neighbor. So this is something.
Hillary Clinton's famous words, absolutely. And sage advice once upon a time to Pakistan, which is now learning the hard way what happens when you keep snakes in your backyard. Ask Pakistan. Justin Trudeau needs to wake up and smell the coffee, and he needs to learn his lessons. On that note, Ambassador Parthasarathi, Ambassador Manju Seth, and Shri, lovely to have all three of you on Global Lens. Thank you so much for your time.